Burkina Faso was burning. Villages were falling. Hope was fading. And in the heart of West Africa, where the cries of the people echoed louder than the bullets, one man, young, silent, and unexpected, stepped from the shadows, not for power, not for glory, but for the soul of his nation. His name? Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And this is how guardians are made. Before he wore a uniform, before his name echoed in military barracks and crowded streets, Ibrahim Traoré was just a boy, quiet, observant, and deeply rooted in the red soil of Bondakwi, a small town in western Burkina Faso. Bondakwi was not known for power or politics. It was a place of farmers, traditions, and simple living. But in that simplicity, something rare was growing, a mind shaped by hardship, discipline, and community. Traoré was raised in a family that valued education and faith. His father, a modest man of principle, often spoke of dignity and duty, while his mother, strong and soft-spoken, taught him to listen more than he spoke. At school, Ibrahim stood out, not for loudness, but for quiet brilliance. Mathematics intrigued him. History stirred something deeper. The stories of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary who once lit a fire in Burkina Faso, took root in his imagination. The more he read, the more he questioned. What happened to our sovereignty? Who will finish what Sankara started? But life in Bondakwi was not easy. The region, like much of the country, bore the marks of neglect. Poor infrastructure, limited access to opportunities, and a growing sense that Burkina Faso had been forgotten. Yet Traoré didn't complain. He watched, he studied, and slowly he began to dream, not of escape but of return, of leading with purpose, not position. By the time he graduated secondary school, the military was calling, not as an escape route, but as a mission. Discipline, order, duty, it matched the values he had grown up with. And so, with a quiet farewell and fire in his eyes, Ibrahim Traoré stepped beyond Bondakwi. The boy was gone. The making of the Guardian had begun. The military academy was no place for weakness. The days were long, the drills relentless, and the expectations high. But for Ibrahim Traoré, it was exactly where he needed to be. Among rows of cadets shouting commands and marching under the blistering sun, he found structure, purpose, and a deeper sense of identity. At the University of Ouagadougou, where he studied geology alongside his military formation, Traoré balanced science and service. He understood that to lead, one must know both the land and the people who live on it. Burkina Faso was more than a flag or a border. It was villages without clean water, children without schools, and farmers without peace. These realities fueled his conviction that national defense was not just about guns. It was about dignity. But it wasn't just the training or the books that shaped him. It was the quiet conversations after lights out, the frustration in his comrades' voices as they spoke of corrupt leadership, and the unspoken hunger in their eyes, for change, for truth, for a leader who wouldn't sell them out. Traoré listened, always more listener than speaker. But when he did speak, his words were sharp, deliberate, and unforgettable. As he rose through the ranks, those around him noticed something different. He didn't chase promotions. He didn't flatter superiors. Instead, he earned respect the old way, through action, discipline, and humility. To him, leadership wasn't about wearing stars on his shoulder. It was about carrying the weight of his people's pain. In the uniform, Ibrahim Traoré became more than a soldier. He became a vessel of something deeper. The burden of justice, the fire of revolution, and the quiet resolve of a man who knew that one day the time would come not just to serve, but to stand. It wasn't ambition that drove Ibrahim Traoré to act. It was anguish. By 2022, Burkina Faso was bleeding. Armed groups ravaged the countryside, displacing millions and paralyzing entire regions. The people cried out for protection, but the government's promises rang hollow. Soldiers watched comrades die. Civilians buried loved ones. And in the silence that followed each tragedy, a question echoed louder. Who will rise for us? Inside the barracks, frustration boiled. Trust in the leadership was crumbling. Corruption, indecision, and foreign dependency had paralyzed the nation's response to crisis. The people didn't just want protection. They wanted liberation. And in hushed meetings, under flickering lights and guarded whispers, a plan began to form. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but his presence steadied the group. He spoke little but with purpose. He didn't promise power. He offered responsibility. When the time came to move, it was not with malice, but with conviction. On September 30th, 2022, the nation awoke to a new reality. The president had been deposed. The red, green, gold Burkina Faso waved not in celebration, but in solemn defiance. The streets were tense, yet hopeful. At the center of it all stood a young captain, calm, composed, and resolute. Traoré addressed the nation with clarity. We took action because the people deserve better. We will not serve foreign masters. We will restore our dignity. He wasn't greeted as a tyrant, but as a guardian. The people, long ignored, saw in him something rare, a leader who did not seek the spotlight, but accepted the burden. The coup was not for power, it was for the people. And in that moment, the boy from Bondakwi became something more, the symbol of a nation's will to reclaim itself. Power, one sees, is a heavy crown, and for Ibrahim Traoré it came ablaze. At just 34, he became the world's youngest head of state, but youth offered no immunity from crisis. Burkina Faso remained in the grip of terror. Armed insurgents controlled swathes of land. International aid was politicized. Foreign troops came with promises and conditions. From the moment he stepped into the presidential seat, Traoré rejected the illusion of comfort. He wore military fatigues, not suits. He refused lavish ceremonies and foreign appeasement. His message was consistent. Burkina Faso belongs to its people. Not to France, not to NATO, not to any external force. But the fire was relentless. Attacks persisted. Food and fuel shortages tested his government. Whispers of coups within coups began to stir. He was not only fighting enemies in the shadows, but also navigating betrayal within. Some in the military questioned his decisions. Foreign media branded him as radical. Diplomats warned him to stay in line. Still, he pressed forward. He visited frontline troops, not behind bulletproof glass, but side by side in dusty terrain. He walked through displaced persons camps, listening without a microphone. He called on youth to rise, not with violence, but with discipline, education, and unity. We are at war, he told them, but not just with guns, with fear, ignorance, and neo-colonial chains. Under Traoré, Burkina Faso pivoted. French forces were asked to leave. A new alliance with other Sahel nations began to form. He declared sovereignty not as a slogan, but as a stance. And yet, he never claimed to be the savior. He reminded his people that he was only a guardian, one among many, a servant of the revolution, not its master. In fire, true leadership is tested. And Traoré, though young and unpolished, chose to walk through it, not away from it. In a world gripped by global powers and foreign interests, Ibrahim Traoré dared to dream differently. His vision for Burkina Faso was not rooted in imitation, but in restoration. The kind that looked back to figures like Sankara, Lumumba, and Nkrumah, yet walked forward with fierce clarity. He envisioned a Burkina Faso that would not bow to foreign debt, nor trade its minerals for silence. A nation where the youth wouldn't drown in migration routes or be devoured by warlords, but rise as farmers, builders, teachers, and defenders of their own soil. To Traoré, sovereignty wasn't about speeches. It was about action, ownership of land, wealth, and destiny. At the heart of his leadership was unity. He called on African nations to stand as one, stronger together, not scattered by colonial borders. The creation of alliances with Mali and Niger signaled not just military cooperation, but new Pan-African consciousness in motion, one that would write its own future, in its own language, on its own terms. Domestically, Traoré pushed for local solutions. The people are not just victims, they are the answer, he said. He empowered community defense initiatives, revived agricultural projects, and emphasized self-reliance. While critics called it risky, the people called it necessary. He never claimed perfection. He admitted the road was hard, the enemies many, and the time short. But in every word and move, Traoré reminded his people, we are not begging for peace. We are fighting for our right to exist with dignity. In the eyes of the poor, he was not a president. He was a protector. In the chants of the youth, he was not just a leader. He was hope with a heartbeat. This was and is the vision of the Guardian. From the quiet corners of Bondakwi to the highest office in the land, Ibrahim Traoré's journey is far from over. His rise is not just a story of one man. It's a reflection of a people tired of waiting, ready to stand, and determined to reclaim their destiny. In an age where many leaders serve interests far from their own soil, Traoré chose a harder path: to walk with his people, to speak their pain, and to fight their fight. Whether history crowns him hero or rebel, one truth remains: he answered a call when others stayed silent. And now, as Burkina Faso walks through fire with its guardian at the helm, the world watches, not for spectacle, but for a spark, because somewhere out there in another village, another young leader is watching, listening, preparing. This story is not finished. If this journey inspired you, challenged you, or opened your eyes, subscribe to the channel. More untold stories, fearless voices, and revolutionary truths await. Stay with us. The struggle continues, and so does the storytelling.